The night she stepped into the town, the wind changed. It carried something colder than winter, something older than memory. Her silhouette appeared first tall, calm, strangely graceful, before her face emerged beneath the flickering lantern hanging outside the general store. Nobody recognized her, yet everyone felt as if they should. Her eyes held a quiet pull, a softness that made people lean in before they realized they'd moved. She asked simple questions, spoke with gentle pauses, and smiled with an innocence so convincing that no one noticed the unease settling in their bones. She said she had no home, no family, no past worth remembering. But the way she watched the houses along the dirt road made it seem as though she was choosing one, like a predator studying shelters instead of prey. That same evening, the youngest of the Miller brothers met her near the old bridge. A harmless greeting turned into a conversation that lasted hours, though he later swore it felt like minutes. She walked away just as the moon slipped behind the clouds, leaving him wondering why his chest felt heavy, like something had been taken from him. The older brother met her next, by accident, or so it seemed. She was standing by the well, looking into the water as if she expected a reflection that never came. He approached her with a polite nod, and she lifted her head slowly, her smile forming too perfectly, too fully, as though she had practiced it for years. He felt his throat tighten and found himself unable to look away. Then their father met her. He had seen many wanderers in his lifetime, but none who stopped the air around him. When she greeted him by name, though he had never introduced himself, he felt a cold ripple crawl across his skin. Yet, against every instinct, he welcomed her to stay in their spare room until she found a place of her own. From that moment on, the Miller house felt different. Lights flickered when she walked down the hallway. Footsteps echoed at night though no one was awake. And somewhere beyond the edges of the farmland, coyotes howled at hours they never had before. People whispered that the woman brought rain the first night she slept under their roof. Others whispered she brought something else. The story begins with the arrival of a woman whose presence feels almost unnatural in its quiet intensity. She steps into the small rural town at dusk, when the sky is painted with fading gold and the streets have emptied enough that strangers are easier to notice. Her clothes are simple, clean but worn, suggesting long travel. Her face carries no expression of exhaustion, as if the journey meant nothing to her, or as if she had been walking for far longer than anyone could guess. She introduces herself with a soft voice, one that doesn't quite match the sharp awareness in her eyes, and though she speaks politely, there is something in her tone that makes people feel she is measuring them, testing their reactions, learning their fears. When she says she has no family and nowhere to go, the words fall too smoothly, too perfectly practiced. People feel sympathy, of course, they always do, but alongside that sympathy grows a subtle unease they can't fully explain. She moves through the town slowly, as though memorizing every corner, every house, every face. The shopkeeper who first speaks to her later says it felt like being watched from behind her smile, like her kindness was only a curtain over something colder. When she asks where she might find a place to rest or some temporary shelter, the townspeople give suggestions, but her eyes seem to drift toward the far end of the road, where the Miller family farmhouse sits on a rise overlooking the fields. It's as if she already knows the landscape, as if she has been here before or has been waiting for this exact place. The people around her notice this focus, yet they cannot bring themselves to question it, feeling oddly compelled to trust her despite their instincts. There is something else, too, an almost magnetic pull that makes everyone want to keep talking to her, to keep her from moving on. She asks simple questions: who lives where, which families have been here long, who owns the farms and who has sons at home. Her curiosity seems harmless on the surface, but woven into each question is a strange intensity that registers only in hindsight. The more she speaks, the more her presence feels like it belongs to someone who isn't merely passing through but someone searching for something specific. Some swear that as she walked past the old church, the clouds thickened and the wind shifted direction, as if the whole town reacted to her arrival. Others whisper later that when her shadow stretched across the ground, it didn't quite match the angle of the setting sun, though no one dares say it aloud at the time, choosing instead to welcome the quiet stranger who had stepped into their lives without a past and without a destination. The two brothers encounter her on the same day, but neither of them knows about the other's meeting, creating an invisible thread of tension that begins weaving itself long before danger has a name. The younger brother, known for his easygoing nature and quick smile, meets her first near the old wooden bridge at the edge of town. The setting sun paints the river in muted amber, and he notices her standing there as if she has been waiting for someone. When he approaches to ask if she needs help, she turns slowly, her expression calm but her gaze carrying a strange depth that makes him falter for a moment. She speaks gently, telling him she is new to the area and trying to understand the town's layout. Her voice settles over him like a quiet fog, and though they talk for only a few minutes, he walks away feeling oddly drained, as if the conversation had lasted hours. There is a heaviness in his chest that he can't explain, but he brushes it off as nothing more than the chill of evening. Later that night, the older brother encounters her by pure chance, or so it seems. He is returning from the fields as the sky shifts from blue to near black, and he sees her standing near the well, staring into the water with a stillness that feels unnatural. He calls out, concerned she might faint from how pale she looks in the dim light. She raises her head with a slow, deliberate motion, and the moment their eyes meet, he feels something tighten in his throat. She smiles, but it is not a normal smile, it is too precise, like a gesture crafted to elicit trust. She speaks softly, asking his name, and somehow she makes the simplest words sound personal, intimate. He feels compelled to continue talking, even though he senses something off, something he cannot put into words. By the time he excuses himself, the air around him feels colder than the night should be. The two brothers return home separately, each carrying his own quiet unease and unspoken fascination, neither aware that they had both felt the same strange pull. Their mother notices a distracted look on the younger one's face at dinner, while the older brother glances out the window more than usual, as if expecting someone to appear from the darkness. Neither mentions the woman, not because they wish to hide her, but because something about the encounters feels difficult to explain. It is as though she planted something silent in their minds, something that grows slowly, invisibly, binding them to her without their realizing it. The night passes with a restless wind, and in the shadows beyond their home, the woman walks alone, a faint curve to her lips, as if everything is unfolding exactly as she intended. The father meets her the following morning, in a moment so ordinary it should have meant nothing, yet it becomes the subtle turning point that shifts the entire fate of his family. He is a man known for his steady nature, someone who has lived long enough to trust instincts over appearances, and he has always taught his sons that a stranger's smile should never be accepted blindly. But when he sees her near the fence bordering their land, standing quietly with her hands folded as though contemplating something only she can see, he feels an unexpected hesitation. She turns toward him before he speaks, as if she sensed his presence long before he arrived. Her eyes meet his with calm certainty, and he is struck by the bizarre impression that she knows him, not just by name or reputation, but in a deeper way that makes his breath pause in his chest. She greets him without asking who he is, addressing him by his full name in a tone that feels too familiar. For a brief moment he is unsettled, but she explains it away so gently, saying she overheard someone in town mention him, that the discomfort fades, though it never disappears entirely. Her voice has a way of smoothing over doubts, like water running over rough stone, softening every instinct that should have warned him. She tells him she is searching for work, a place to stay, something stable after a long journey. Her words are humble, yet her posture is composed, elegant in a way that does not match her story. It is this contrast that makes him pause again, that sense of disconnect between what she claims to be and what she radiates simply by standing there. Still, something urges him to be kind, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of a deeper pull he cannot name. He offers her water and walks her toward the house, all the while feeling as though he is being studied. Her attention never wavers, and her silence between sentences grows heavier than speech. As they approach the porch, a sudden gust of wind sweeps across the field, strong enough to rattle the windows. He notices her hair does not shift with the wind, not even a strand, but he shakes the thought away before it fully reaches the part of his mind that questions things. She thanks him with a smile that seems to soften the air around her, and for reasons he cannot justify, he hears himself offering her temporary shelter until she can find her footing in the town. When she steps inside his home, the temperature seems to drop ever so slightly, subtle enough to ignore but strong enough to register. His sons look up, both startled, both recognizing her, though neither speaks. She stands in the doorway, calm and grateful, while something unspoken begins to settle over the Miller household, something that feels like the first quiet ripple before a gathering storm. The days following her arrival slip into a strange rhythm, one that feels ordinary on the surface yet threaded with a tension nobody can name. The younger brother begins spending more time around the house than usual, finding excuses to help with chores he normally avoids, drifting toward any room she happens to be in. She notices, of course, always greeting him with a soft smile that seems to quiet his thoughts. Their conversations are brief but filled with a warmth he can't explain, as if she understands him in a way no one else ever has. The older brother watches from a distance, feeling a discomfort he doesn't want to acknowledge. Each time he passes her in the hallway, he feels a strange pull behind his ribs, a silent urge to stay, to speak, to linger, yet he forces himself to look away, telling himself it is nothing more than temporary fascination. Within a few weeks, the unease deepens. The woman slips seamlessly into the daily life of the Miller home, moving through it with an ease that makes it seem as though she has been there for years. She helps with meals, notices small details about each family member, and subtly adjusts her behavior to match whatever makes them most comfortable. The father finds himself relying on her presence, trusting her judgment in matters he once handled alone. The older brother grows quieter, conflicted by the fact that he keeps thinking about her even when he tries not to. But it is the younger brother who falls fastest, drawn to her with a kind of desperate certainty, as though something inside him has already chosen her. The shift from quiet companionship to something deeper happens almost too smoothly to notice. One night, while the rest of the family sleeps, she stands on the porch staring out into the fields lit by moonlight. The younger brother steps outside, unable to sleep, and finds her already knowing he would come. Their conversation is soft, almost whispered, filled with pauses that linger just long enough to blur the line between comfort and enchantment. By the time dawn creeps over the horizon, he feels certain he has found the woman he wants to marry. The proposal follows quickly. The family is surprised, the older brother especially, though he hides the tension tightening in his jaw. The father is hesitant at first, sensing the speed is unnatural, but her gentle reassurances smooth over his doubts with terrifying ease. The wedding is simple, quiet, held under the wide sky behind the Miller house. She wears a dress loaned by a neighbor, yet somehow she looks as though it belongs to her and always has. From the moment she becomes part of the family in name, subtle shifts darken the atmosphere inside the home. Rooms grow colder without reason. Objects are found in places no one left them. The nights stretch longer, filled with faint whispers and soft footsteps that never seem to reach a source. And though no one speaks it aloud, the sense that something has entered the house with her, something unseen and patient, begins tightening its hold around them all. The first signs that something is terribly wrong begin as small, almost dismissible moments that the family tries to explain away. The younger brother, newly married and still wrapped in the soft haze of devotion, starts waking up in the middle of the night struggling to catch his breath. At first he assumes it is stress or exhaustion, but each time he opens his eyes, he finds her already awake, sitting upright beside him with an expression too calm for the hour. She tells him he must have been dreaming, brushing her fingers lightly over his forehead, and though her touch soothes him for a moment, the uneasiness lingers long after she lies back down. Over the next few days, he grows paler, weaker, moving through the house as if he is carrying a weight no one else can see. The father notices his son's fading energy and asks if he has been eating well, but the younger brother hesitates before answering, unable to explain the strange heaviness that clings to him. His appetite is gone, replaced by a constant feeling of something pressing on his chest. The older brother observes the changes with growing suspicion, especially when he realizes that the woman's presence always seems strongest when the younger brother looks the weakest. She hovers near him with an attentiveness that appears loving from afar, yet there is a coldness in her eyes when she thinks no one is watching, a silent calculation that chills the older brother more than he wants to admit. The nights grow worse. The younger brother begins gasping in his sleep, clawing at the air as if drowning in an invisible tide. Each time, she wakes before anyone else, resting her hands gently on him until his breathing slows. But her calm, serene expression never changes, not even when he trembles violently. One night, the older brother swears he hears whispers coming from their room, voices layered so faintly that he cannot understand them, yet the tone is unmistakably wrong, as if something ancient and hungry is speaking just beneath the level of sound. Then, without warning, the younger brother collapses at breakfast one morning. There is no cry, no struggle, only a sudden stillness as his body slumps forward. The father rushes to him, shouting his name, but his skin is already cold, his face drained of color. His eyes are half open, frozen in a look of profound terror, as though the last thing he saw was something no living person should ever witness. The doctor who examines him later finds no cause of death, no illness, no injury, nothing that explains how a healthy young man could simply stop living. The woman stands nearby, offering soft words of grief, yet not a single tear falls from her eyes. She comforts the father with a hand on his shoulder, her touch lingering a second too long, and the older brother watches her closely, feeling a certainty rising in his chest that his brother's death is not a tragedy of nature but the first sign of something far more sinister tightening its grip on their family. After the younger brother's sudden and inexplicable death, the house is plunged into a silence that feels heavier than grief alone. The father and older brother move through the rooms cautiously, avoiding each other's eyes, haunted by the image of the younger brother's last expression. Yet the woman remains. She does not leave. Instead, she claims, softly and unwaveringly, that she belongs here, that the house, the family, and the land itself are part of her fate. Her words, delivered with calm certainty, seem to push back against the raw despair surrounding them, and despite the lingering tension, the father and the older brother find themselves listening, unable to resist the pull of her quiet insistence. Days pass, and the atmosphere of the house grows strange in ways that cannot be ignored. Objects are misplaced only to appear in exact patterns later, shadows shift independently of the sun, and the wind whistles through empty corners carrying whispers that vanish when anyone approaches. Yet amid these disturbances, the older brother notices an even stranger phenomenon, his own resistance weakening, his thoughts revolving more often around her presence, a compulsion he cannot explain. The father, too, finds himself strangely compliant, agreeing to small requests, letting her organize the household in ways that defy his usual order. Every glance she casts is measured, precise, and in them there is a promise and a warning both at once. The transition to marriage occurs with a speed that would have seemed impossible under normal circumstances. She expresses a desire to stay, not as a visitor but as a permanent member of the household, and before either man fully processes the implications, vows are exchanged. The older brother, though troubled, finds himself captivated by her gaze, the calm power of her words, and the inexplicable sense that refusing her would bring a greater, unspoken consequence. The father, too, consents, drawn not by desire but by a mix of reverence and a creeping terror that she has already woven herself into the very fabric of their lives. Once married, the household undergoes an almost imperceptible shift. The rooms feel colder in one moment, warmer in the next, yet the changes are subtle enough to be rationalized as coincidence. Shadows stretch longer than they should, corners of the house seem darker than logic allows, and yet every family member is compelled to obey her presence. The older brother's interactions with her blur the line between fascination and fear. He notices that her attention to detail, her understanding of their habits and fears, goes beyond mere observation. There is an awareness in her that feels almost preternatural, an ability to anticipate thoughts before they arise. Even in mourning, the family senses that something beyond comprehension has entered their home. The older brother feels it most acutely, a slow, undeniable realization that his life, his choices, and even the memory of his lost sibling are being drawn into a pattern he cannot yet name, a design controlled by her quiet, unrelenting influence that leaves him both terrified and helpless. Once the woman becomes fully enmeshed in the household, the disturbances begin to escalate, moving from subtle unease to events that cannot be ignored. At first, it is small things, the clatter of dishes falling in the kitchen despite no one being near, doors that lock and unlock of their own accord, and fleeting glimpses of shadows in rooms where no one stands. The family convinces themselves these occurrences are coincidences or tricks of the mind, yet even in the rational attempts to explain them away, a sense of dread settles over the Miller home. The older brother notices a pattern to the disturbances, they intensify when she is nearby, and when she leaves a room, the lingering chill seems to carry a silent warning. The house itself feels alive, and in ways that make the family question whether they are intruding on something that has always existed beneath its walls. Animals on the property begin reacting strangely. Livestock refuses to enter their usual barns, horses stampede without provocation, and birds circle the house at odd hours before disappearing suddenly. At night, their howls echo as though mourning or warning, but no human ear hears what they sense. The family tries to rationalize the behavior, blaming it on weather, disease, or natural instincts, yet the older brother notices the uncanny timing. The animals react most violently after she moves through the fields or stands at the edge of the property, her presence marking a shift in the ordinary rhythm of life. Even the father begins to notice that nothing remains untouched by the subtle yet persistent influence she exerts. The human experience of the household deteriorates alongside these signs. Footsteps echo along hallways at hours when everyone is asleep, and the sounds carry a deliberate cadence, as though someone or something is pacing with intent. Objects appear in new places, carefully arranged in ways that seem symbolic but indecipherable. Some nights, the older brother awakens to faint, whispered voices coming from the walls, murmurs layered just below comprehension, urging him to see what he cannot and to fear what he has not yet imagined. Doors creak open despite the windless night, and lights flicker with unnatural rhythm. Even when the father or the older brother attempts to confront the phenomenon logically, they find themselves paralyzed by a creeping realization that the house no longer follows their understanding of reality. The family begins to feel the weight of anticipation, as if something beyond ordinary experience is gathering momentum within the house. Nights stretch longer, hours passing in disorienting increments. The tension between them and the woman tightens, subtle but undeniable, as though her very presence channels a force that will not relent. There is a growing understanding that the disturbances are not random, that they are signals of something approaching, a truth the family is only beginning to sense, one that promises to change their lives in ways impossible to reverse, a silent dread creeping steadily closer with each passing day. The tension that had been building within the household reaches a horrifying apex when the older brother begins to experience the same suffocating dread that claimed his younger sibling. It starts subtly at first, a chill in the air that follows him down the hall, a shadow at the corner of his vision that vanishes the moment he turns, and the faintest whispering that seems to echo his own thoughts back at him with slight distortion. At night, he awakens to the sensation of someone or something watching from the doorway, but every time he moves to confront it, the figure disappears, leaving only the faint impression of presence. The woman, calm and composed as ever, observes these moments with a serenity that unnerves him. Her attentiveness never wavers, and her quiet reassurance does not comfort so much as intensify the feeling that she controls not just the household, but the very atmosphere itself. Days pass, and the older brother's health begins to decline in ways that mirror his younger sibling's mysterious demise. He becomes withdrawn, restless, and plagued by a creeping unease he cannot articulate. He confides in his father, describing the cold that follows him, the voices he cannot place, the sensation of impending doom, but his words are dismissed at first as grief and fear taking hold. Yet the signs grow more undeniable. Objects shift when he is not looking, footsteps echo in empty corridors, and a shadow passes across his bedroom wall even in the dead of day. Each event carries a weight of intention, a deliberate rhythm that convinces him he is being led toward an unseen conclusion. One evening, the older brother is found slumped in the parlor, his body twisted in an unnatural posture, his face frozen in an expression of abject terror. The father rushes to him, but it is too late. There is no sign of injury, no cause apparent to human understanding. The room is silent, except for a low, almost imperceptible hum that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. The woman kneels beside him, her hand lightly brushing his shoulder, her calm demeanor as unnerving as the death itself. Her presence is steady, almost protective, yet it carries the same suffocating authority that had sealed the fate of his younger brother. In the aftermath, the father is left with a mounting realization that this is not coincidence. The woman's influence is far beyond the ordinary, she is entwined with forces that defy understanding. Each death follows a pattern, each incident occurs under her watchful gaze, and each time the family senses that the same invisible hand guiding these tragedies is still at work, preparing for the next step. The house, once a sanctuary, now feels like a trap, and the father, for all his years of wisdom and experience, begins to understand that they have welcomed into their home something that cannot be bargained with, something that has already begun to decide the fate of everyone under its roof. After the deaths of both sons, the father finds himself in a state of fragile awareness, caught between grief, fear, and a strange compulsion he cannot name. He notices the same pull that ensnared his sons now tightening around him, subtle at first but growing more insistent with each passing day. She moves through the house with the same effortless grace, her eyes always seeming to find him even when he tries to remain unseen. Her words are soft, almost soothing, yet they carry an unspoken authority that presses against the edges of his consciousness. When she speaks of the home, of the land, of belonging, he feels the same irrational certainty his sons once did, a certainty that he must obey, must comply, must consent. As the days stretch on, the father begins noticing fragments of truth hidden in her stories and mannerisms. There are references she slips casually into conversation that hint at knowledge far beyond the town, allusions to places and events that no one alive should remember. Letters from distant towns arrive describing uncanny similarities, families she has entered, men who have died under circumstances eerily like those in the Miller household. At first, he questions his mind, convinced grief and exhaustion must be warping his perception. Yet as the pattern repeats itself, the realization becomes unavoidable. He understands, with a rising horror, that she has been here before, not just in their town, but across decades, leaving a trail of devastation wherever she chooses to lodge herself in a family. The father's own behavior becomes increasingly erratic. He finds himself obeying her suggestions with minimal thought, arranging the house, attending to her requests, and following routines that feel instinctive rather than chosen. There are moments when he catches glimpses of her watching him from doorways, her expression unreadable, and he senses a depth of intelligence and patience that transcends normal human understanding. He begins to recognize that this is not merely a woman who has married into his family, she is something far older, something deliberate, something that bends reality to her will. The sense of inevitability tightens around him like a noose. Every step he takes in the house, every decision he makes, is guided by her presence, often before he even realizes he is moving. He becomes aware that the deaths of his sons were not accidents, that their fates were preordained by her unseen hand, and that he, too, is on a path toward a destiny he cannot evade. He sees in the small, inexplicable occurrences, the cold drafts, the shifting shadows, the whispering voices, the evidence of her ancient knowledge and influence, and the full horror of her power begins to settle into his mind. In that slow, relentless dawning, he realizes that the family's tragedy is part of a pattern that stretches far beyond them, a truth that has been quietly unfolding long before he ever set eyes on her, and that there may be no escape from the consequences she brings. The horrifying truth of her existence begins to crystallize in the father's mind with a clarity that leaves him trembling. As he pieces together the fragments of stories from other towns, the chilling pattern becomes undeniable. She has moved from family to family for decades, even centuries, leaving a trail of dead men wherever she settles. The realization grips him with a cold, suffocating fear, for it is not just the pattern of death that unnerves him, but the impossible nature of her own being. There is no evidence that she has aged in the slightest. Her hair, skin, and eyes remain exactly as they were the first day she arrived in the Miller home. The father recalls descriptions from letters and whispers in distant villages, accounts of her presence in places he knows must be older than the towns themselves, faces and names changing around her, but her own appearance frozen in time. The notion that she is not bound by normal human limitations gnaws at the edges of his sanity. He begins to understand the mechanism behind the deaths that claimed his sons. It is not random or accidental, it is deliberate, almost ritualistic in its precision. The men she marries become ensnared in her presence, drawn in by a combination of charm, compulsion, and an inexplicable power that renders resistance futile. Their own instincts, which should have warned them, are silenced or twisted until they cannot act against her. And then, inevitably, they die, often in ways that leave no cause discernible to ordinary eyes, their faces reflecting the terror of witnessing something that defies comprehension. He senses that she watches with a patience that spans decades, even centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike, observing every thought and fear before it can manifest. The father's awareness of this truth does little to alleviate the dread that settles in his chest. He realizes that his own life is now entwined in the same pattern, that his actions, thoughts, and even memories are being subtly guided toward the same inescapable conclusion. Each time he glimpses her serene, unchanging face, he understands that it carries the weight of centuries, the knowledge of every life she has claimed, and the quiet certainty that she will move on only after the family's men are gone. Even as he grapples with the full horror, he sees the cruel inevitability. She has existed far longer than anyone can measure, and the Miller household has become merely another link in the chain of families she has entangled. The men she marries vanish, leaving her alone to drift onward, carrying her presence like a shadow that spans generations. The father comprehends that this is not a human tragedy, not an accident, but the deliberate outcome of a being whose life and purpose are measured not in years but in the steady extinguishing of those drawn into her orbit, and that the legacy she leaves behind is always the same: absence, silence, and the lingering terror of a presence that refuses to be contained.